A federal judge in Louisiana is banning Biden officials from contacting big tech companies. A headline from the New York Times explains that the order came in a lawsuit filed by the attorneys general of Missouri and Louisiana, who claim the administration is trying to silence its critics. The case was primarily centered around COVID-19 censorship, but also included the Justice Department's efforts to suppress reporting about Hunter Biden's laptop in the run-up to the 2020 election. As expected, mainstream media outlets like the New York Times are panicking over this news. In their opening paragraph, they complain that the ruling could curtail efforts to combat false and misleading narratives about the coronavirus pandemic and other issues. On Twitter, journalist Glenn Greenwald said, "Of course, the New York Times depicts this anti-censorship ruling as a dangerous shield for, quote, disinformation. The most surreal fact of U.S. political life is that the leading advocates for unified state/corporate censorship are large media corporations." Article at Zero Hedge adds that the dozens of people and agencies bound by the injunction include President Biden, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, the Food and Drug Administration, Centers for Disease Control, the Treasury Department, State Department, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, the FBI, and the entire Justice Department, and the Department of Health and Human Services. An article at the New York Post adds that during proceedings in the case, top former Biden administration officials such as Dr. Anthony Fauci and one-time White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki were summoned for depositions. In his ruling on Tuesday, Donald Trump-appointed Judge Terry A. Doughty said that, quote, "During the COVID-19 pandemic, the United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian Ministry of Truth." Another quote from Judge Doughty says, "If the allegations made by plaintiffs are true, the present case arguably involves the most massive attack against free speech in United States history. The plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits in establishing that the government has used its power to silence the opposition." Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt said on Twitter on Tuesday that a federal judge in Missouri v. Biden just granted a preliminary injunction prohibiting the FBI, DOJ, DHS, and other agencies from working with big tech to censor on social media. He calls it a big win for the First Amendment on this Independence Day, saying, "I'm proud to have led the fight." Judge Doughty agreed, ruling the states, quote, "have produced evidence of a massive effort by defendants, from the White House to federal agencies, to suppress speech based on its content." He ruled parts of the government, including the Department of Health and Human Services, the White House, the Justice Department, and the FBI, could not talk to social media companies for, quote, "the purpose of urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing in any manner the removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content containing protected free speech." Judge Doughty also wrote, quote, "The White House defendants made it very clear to social media companies what they wanted to suppress and what they wanted amplified. Faced with unrelenting pressure from the most powerful office in the world, the social media companies apparently complied." Article adds that Judge Doughty quoted communications from administration officials to social media company employees, saying that they represent, quote, "examples of coercion exercised by the White House defendants." It's a small sampling, a few examples of these messages from Biden administration officials to big tech companies. The first says, "Cannot stress the degree to which this needs to be resolved immediately. Please remove this account immediately." Another message to Facebook from Biden officials says, "Are you guys effing serious? I want an answer on what happened here, and I want it today." Another quote says, "This is a concern that is shared at the highest, and I mean highest levels of the White House." There's one more quote that says, "Hey folks, wanted to flag the below tweet, and am wondering if we can get moving on the process of having it removed ASAP." The judge noted that the badgering came simultaneous with threats of changing the social media regulation scheme, and that those threats had extra credibility since they came as the Democrats controlled the White House and Congress. At one point in his 155-page order, Doughty underscored that, quote, each example or category of suppressed speech was conservative in nature. This targeted suppression of conservative ideas is a perfect example of viewpoint discrimination of political speech. The judge says that American citizens have the right to engage in free debate about the significant issues affecting the country. In the 155-page order, Judge Doughty goes on to add that the evidence thus far depicts an almost dystopian scenario. This article goes on to add that the accusation that social media companies and the government were acting in concert is substantiated by the communication and bureaucracy that surrounded the endeavor. Quote, many emails between the White House and social media companies referred to themselves as partners. Twitter even sent the White House a partner support portal for expedited review of the White House's requests. Finally, Judge Doughty says if there is a bedrock principle underlying the First Amendment, it is that the government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because society finds the idea itself offensive or disagreeable. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey said on Twitter, quote, just as the judge hinted at in our first hearing in May, there is nothing stopping the feds from continuing to censor political speech without this injunction. The federal government cannot be trusted to protect Americans' rights, which is precisely why our founders enshrined the First Amendment into the Constitution. My office is doing everything it can to protect Missourians' right to free speech from the largest First Amendment violation in American history. This injunction is a huge win in the fight to defend our most fundamental freedoms, but we're not done yet, we're just getting started. Meanwhile, a White House official told the New York Post on Tuesday that the Department of Justice is reviewing the injunction and will evaluate its options. They said, quote, this administration has promoted responsible actions to protect public health, safety, and security when confronted by challenges like a deadly pandemic and foreign attacks on our elections. Our consistent view remains that social media platforms have a critical responsibility to take account of the effects their platforms are having on the American people, but make independent choices about the information they present. Please leave a comment and tell me what you think about this latest update. If you could give this video a thumbs up, remember to click the like button, that's greatly appreciated, and make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Thanks again.